We have this afternoon with Mr. Pat Burns, Breck Howard. Breck was the winner of the 1983 National Amateur Retriever Championship with NAFC FC Bjorn's Blazing Hydropsyche. And Breck is also a contestant in this year's National Amateur Championship, dog number 24, FC AFC Valtor's Hayseed Kid. Good luck to you, Brett. Pat, take it away.
Thank you. Brett, thank you for joining us.
Good to see you.
Great
Pat.
to see you again. I got the great opportunity to meet you and Cindy in my early days, in the early 80s, when I came west and trained with Don Romaine.
Right.
And that was right after you'd won the National. You had a hot potato dog named Krugerrand, right? Did you call him Krugerrand?
Right. I call him Kruger.
Kruger.
Yep.
And I remember he was a handful to keep under wraps.
He was. He was a marking fool, but he was a good. Yeah, he was a good dog.
I guess I wanted to start out by talking about you started, you took a break from the game shortly after that.
Right. We got out of the game for about 20-some years. Raised our kids, played softball with them, and that sort of stuff, and then kind of just accidentally bounced back in. And we've had a really great time. We were lucky enough to have a good dog kid, and so we've been able to get back into playing the national game, which is the real fun part of this.
So I asked you the question before we started for you to think about a little bit. Do you feel like the game has changed significantly from on a national level from back then?
I think the game has changed significantly from the standpoint of the day-to-day trials and what dogs are expected to do, but and some of that transfers to the national, but a lot of it is the same kind of the same thing. It's pretty close. I particularly this trial, I think it is reminiscent of some of the older trials in that the dog can see the birds. The tests are, are pretty apparent of what's going on, and so a lot of that is pretty similar. The distances certainly have increased from the old days overall, but this trial feels like just running a national in the old days too.
So I came to this national, my first real national that I attended, 32 years ago, and that's when you were defending your title, wasn't it?
Right. I ran this national in 1984.
Right. So, and I was here in '84. So, how did that go for you? Did you?
I think I went to this, the 6th or 7th series.
So Blaze was an interesting dog. He was really came out of no breeding, didn't he?
Right. Blaze was really interesting. He was no breeding. It was some guys just did a backyard breeding, and they had a bunch of hunting buddies, and they distributed the dogs to anybody, and there's nothing. A lot of them had no real professional training, but any dog out of that group of 3 litters of puppy, any dog that went to compete in trials, they all became field champions, and there were 5 of them.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing. That's a real success story. You hear of that in athletics, professional athletics, of small town kid kind of turns into a national competitor of some sort, and Blaze was no exception to that.
Yeah, Blaze has a pretty interesting story, and briefly, he was owned by Cy Gilbert, and Cy was a college kid, and he needed to sell the dog because he had 2 of them, and the dog had just won a couple opens, and he was a little over 2 years old, 2 years of age. So he had a buyer for big dollars in those days, and when they x-rayed him, he had bilateral bad hips. So my wife was talking to Cy at a trial, and he needed the money, and so we made a deal for a very reasonable price. And everybody said we'd be terribly sad that we did that because he would break down, and we'd regret doing it. So we took him home, and he was riding in the van, and he was crying and moaning, and I was thinking, oh boy, what have we done? So we get him home, tired, go in the house, close the door, and a few minutes later I heard this rustling, and I go outside, and he's at the front door. So I, did you close the kennel? Yeah, I closed the kennels. We go out there, and there they are. So got 7-foot kennels, chain link fence. So we put him away, walked back in the house, and bam, he was back in there again. So we watched him out the window. He'd take a run, just come right up over the top of those things. So we had to put ends on him this way. So he looked at that and says, well, I'll just jump over this one to the next one and then over the top. So the interesting thing is that he never limped a day in his life. He he qualified for nationals up until I think he was either 11 or 12 years old. I judged the national, so he couldn't run it when he was that age. And he died when he was 15, and he was absolutely healthy the day until he died. But he did have this, I don't know whether it was nutritional or whether it was hereditary. We never bred him because of that, but he was, he had this massive front end.
Yeah.
And the tiniest thing.
I remember seeing him.
Yeah, and he just went.
So he was a problem solver from the get-go,
Yeah.
right? From day one when you brought him home, huh?
Yeah, he was.
And he wasn't going to be denied what he wanted to do. And that's probably why we got that N in front of his name.
Yeah, that's right. He was amazing. That when he won that, one of the hardest tests was going across the river 3 times and across the bottom of this riverbed. And there were only 3 dogs that did that in the 9th series. So
McCall, Idaho.
yeah, McCall, Idaho.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Well, I want to change the subject for a second and talk about the test that you haven't run it. You'll run it tomorrow.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, I think these guys have put on an amazing trial as far as tough marks, and they've got all kinds of answers, and they're in good shape. This is taking a little longer, but that's what you have to do if you want to watch them swim a little bit and have to be water dogs. But this test is hard because you got that big wild flyer right up in front of you. There's a couple dogs that are either broke or nearly broke, and I think that has a big wipeout effect on their memory and what's going on. And then the rest of it's got all that water and terrain and bird positionings that makes it extremely tough. And so, and I think that it does separate those dogs that can mark.
Do you think the contrary nature of that right-hand bird sets them up for that long bird at all?
Yeah, because you mean because it's thrown in.
Yeah, thrown kind of down the shore,
and
they
run down the shore. I think it does. I think it has a pretty big effect on it. And then all that terrain between there, that's why those dogs are
And then
caving in and going to the shore real soon. So.
Well, I want to wish you luck in the morning.
I appreciate
And
it.
this is going to go till midday tomorrow, it sounds like.
Right.
And at that point, the leaderboard's going to get a little bit smaller, isn't it?
Right. I think they got a lot of answers. They've got answers today, and they've got all kinds of stuff in their books. And it's been a real. The guys have been very generous in their callbacks. I think everybody's having a good time, and I think it's been pretty good trial.
Well, the
so
chemistry around the judges seems to be amazing. They really seem
it
to
does.
be
It seems that they're doing good. They're making the contestants feel comfortable. I think they're doing a great job.
Well, Breck, thank you for joining me.
Good
luck
talk
to you,
to
and
you,
welcome
Pat.
back to the game. It's great to have you back.
I love it. It's good to be back.